Greetings and welcome to Sports 101, the sports talk show that discusses sports beyond the X's and O's. We like to expand our conversation here at Sports 101 to include the history, past, and present in the making of sport. I'm your host, Jamar Harp, and be sure to follow me at Coach underscore Harp412. Make sure you get social with SportsZone Chicago and the litany of shows on Twitter at SportsZone Chicago, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Please remember, SportsZone Chicago is a sports talk app. You can watch and listen to my show as well as the various other shows on SportsZone Chicago. Please keep up with our breaking news. If you missed the show, log into the podcast or watch a video via our YouTube channel. Search Sports Zone Chicago. But most importantly, download the Sports Zone Chicago app. That app can be found on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon Prime. Tonight's episode will be Africa and the NBA. We all know that currently the NBA is predominantly filled with players of African descent. However, this episode we're going to look at what the NBA is doing in continental Africa. Kind of think of it as how Major League Baseball went to the Dominican Republic and Brigham Young and Mormon churches went to the Samoan Islands to get talent. This past year, Dr. Martha Saavedra of the University of California, Berkeley, moderated a conference called Sports Africa Live. Sports Africa Live is a network of teachers, practitioners, meaning athletes, as well as individuals who teach within a realm of sports. Their aim is to make African sports studies an interdisciplinary, inclusive, and accessible part of the global conversation on the scholarship of sports. If you look at our logo right here, it says Africa Sports Network. And basically what their job is to do is, like I just said, they want people to look at the accessibility and how sports in Africa, as long as sports education, can fit in with the mainstream society. This panel consisted of several individuals who either played in their home countries on the continent of Africa and some teachers as well. Some people that were there were Astu Njai. Njai works for the player experience of the NBA Academy in Africa in Senegal. The NBA has done basketball without borders for quite some time now, and they have emissaries per se set up in certain countries to help with the player experience. Player experience will be detailed to somewhat operations where they deal with their experiences in learning English, learning the game, different calls that are associated with it, and things about the Western world. Boniface Ndong, who's a Senegalese player and currently the head coach of the Senegalese national team. Isabelle Jacobo, who plays currently professionally in France, and Macturn Amarchi, an independent sports professional from the United States. This conference went over various amount of topics. Some of these topics included worldwide migration of African players, similar to soccer, as I've already stated. Oftentimes, since basketball is still kind of foreign in the continent of Africa, there's a big push to I have to leave to make it. We've saw so many instances in the movies before where the tall African teenager comes to the United States and lives with a religious family, goes to a religious institution, St. John's, Georgetown, etc., and is usually exploited. Again, their goal is to stop this migration and attempts to develop a league of their own, per se, within the continent of Africa. Also discussed was the current and future state of women's basketball, mainly talking about opportunities and challenges, from the financial, social, cultural, and political standpoint. Just like in the United States, women's basketball does suffer worldwide as well. There's a prevalent notion to place women in the home, especially overseas. If sport is considered leisure activity, and instead of playing a sport, there's so many other things that this young woman could be doing. And this conference wanted to break down those barriers and stereotypes. Another piece of information gone over was how to develop the game locally to ensure that individuals who want to participate in basketball can earn a decent wage and stay on the continent. Again, similar to soccer, I want to use that as a reference because that is a global game and has already permeated every country on the African continent. With soccer, they have the opportunity to play in domestic leagues and not make as much money as they would if they were in Spain or England or any of the top European leagues. However, they still can make a good living in their home continent. In regards to basketball, which is up and coming, the salaries are quite lower. So the goal is to improve the infrastructure, get business support, make it homegrown so that it can grow the league from within so these players that can stay. Another topic was increasing the nationalism of your individual country and continent through the sport of basketball. Um, what was talked about by panelists was that if you look at the way sport transforms one's national views of one's country, oftentimes the continent of Africa, and particularly West Africa, you hear comments such as they're running from a warlord, they have something up their sleeves. Danny Ferry, former Duke player, he actually made a comment about that in regards to Luol Deng a few years back, saying he was a good player, but he's African. He has a two-step to him. He'll listen to you, but ultimately he'll try to get you at the end. So again, to stop these stereotypes, a lot of people feel like basketball and developing a domestic league will help bring forth positive images of these individual countries that differ from Western media. Grassroots programs were also discussed. This is very important because, again, as the game is new, you need to develop the culture of the game, how to play it, where can we play it. It's not like soccer. I can go to a beach or someone's field. I need usually a level surface, baskets to be a certain height, rims, etc. So getting that grassroots development within the game would be integral on the continent. One other thing that was discussed was the professional development in Africa. Um, Many of the athletes in all sports don't make it to the Premier Leagues in Europe, USA, or globally. So this will be a great opportunity to get a network of coaches, scouts, managers, GMs, and local businesses to all come together and work towards growing this league. um, Proper governance and regulation was also discussed. We all know in sport, oftentimes overseas sport corruption is involved. So allowing the proper governance to take place and regulation so you can have a seamless transition once the basketball league in Africa begins um, is a great tool. In regards to continental players um, from Africa, currently there are 13 African born players in the NBA. Just to give you a quick synopsis of those, for Cameroon, you have Joel Embiid and Pascal Siakam. Nigeria, you have Victor Oladipo, Masai Ujiri, the GM from the Toronto Raptors, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis is listed, even though he was born in Greece. His parents are Nigerian immigrants. And the rule in Greece is that since he wasn't born there, he's not a citizen yet. So he has to revert back to his country of origin, which is Nigeria. From the Congo, we have Emmanuel Mudiay and Serge Ibaka, and another known player who had a big splash his rookie year was Bol Bol, the son of Manute Bol, who hails from the Sudan. Um, one good thing about this is we have to recognize the evolving relationship between basketball on the continent of Africa and the U.S. Is this relationship good? Is it bad? Who's going to benefit from it? Uh,
Hey, I wanted to pop in, and before you get past Giannis, I really wanted to talk about that because he and his brother pretty much grew up in Greece. And you're right, there was a rule about them because they were not born there, they cannot be Greek citizens. By the way, once he began to get a certain amount of success, he is now a Greek citizen, by the way. And many Greeks take great pride in him. And I kind of took exception with it because of how Greece treats a lot of their immigrants
mhm.
that come into the country specifically from Africa. That, him and his brother, they would do a lot of kind of small commerce things like selling things, but then they were tall. So eventually they started playing basketball. And as they moved along, more notice came to them and their family were granted some different exceptions. So he is actually now a Greek citizen, by the way.
Okay. Well, I'm glad. Thank you. This is my podcast, Magi Maya Kai, who helps me on my journey. Um, the one thing about Giannis and his family is, besides while they were waiting to be Greek citizens, his name is actually Nigerian.
Yes, it
They
is.
actually changed it to make it sound more Greek.
Yes.
So that is very similar to when Asian Americans come to the United States and they tell you their name is Fred or their quote unquote American name to fit into that culture, even though they weren't citizens. That was quite amazing to me.
Hmm. Yeah, so very interesting kind of history there for him that I guarantee the reason he was actually granted Greek citizenship, and I'm just going to say it, is because of his success in the NBA when it's all said and done.
I agree.
All
I
right,
agree.
I'll go back behind the curtain now.
All right. All right. So the Magi Maya Kai is going back into the curtain. Um, thank you for that great point. In regards to these relationships, we have to examine um, how are they going to benefit? Are these relationships going to be good or bad? Remember, we have so many examples of independent leagues being assimilated into the major or dominant league and the independent league failing. So the basketball African League, which we're going to talk about later, has to be wary of this. The first continental African player to play in the United States was Hakeem Olajuwon from the University of Houston. He was drafted in 1983. Here's a picture of Hakeem with the commissioner at the time. He was a part of the great Houston Five Slammer Jammer teams who went to the Final Four. Didn't win a championship, but again, they were known for their up and down style of play um, in the early 80s. 11 years later, he won the NBA championship and became a finals MVP. So obviously, the first player really made an impact. Um, After Olajuwon, there was obviously many more players that came after him. And what seemed to happen is there was a disconnect between players in both sides of the continent. Um, the African American players were disconnected from the players of African descent. So when they came over, it wasn't like a cultural infusion that people really think will happen. And that is due to different things projected in the media and mainly miseducation. Um, Also, these players, as Maya stated, Giannis and his brother will be selling trinkets throughout the city. Many of these players from continental Africa and these major cities grew up in similar situations, and due to them being tall, were thrust into playing basketball without having knowledge or maybe only seeing a game once or twice a year. Manute Bol um, has said many times the first time he tried to dunk, he got his teeth caught in the net and lost a couple teeth. because he didn't quite know what he was doing. He saw that people had to jump, but again, if you're tall, or as Manute was very tall, he didn't have to jump. Knowing where to put your body, how to move your face away from the rim, how to come down, a lot of things that we take for granted because we grew up seeing basketball, hearing the ball being dribbled, just because these gentlemen are tall, and not seeing that they had uh, difficulties the first time entering the basketball court.
Is it true that Manute Bull was a goalie? Did I hear that correctly? He played soccer?
Yeah, a lot of them played soccer. Hakeem Olajuwon was a goalie. He was a big time goalie. He was very good. Manute Bowl played a little. Remember, that's the common game where most of these people come from. So they grew up playing soccer,
Right.
and then talent agents see their height and transition them oftentimes through the Arab Dare approach by going to America or some country with a host family, and they ended up at St. John's, Georgetown, schools of that nature.
Gotcha. All right.
All right, so again, a lot of these people come from a soccer background and just getting used to using their hands when they're used to using their feet and body to play with a ball is difficult. I've already referenced the Arab Deer mentality, but I like to speak on that again. That comes from the '90s film in which there was a scout who was about to get fired from a Saint something school. It was a fictional school, but it resembled what I just talked about. If you can look at Georgetown and particularly, excuse me, they've had a list of players, in particular centers from Africa. Um, Essentially, the movie The Arab There talks about this coach, Kevin Bacon, who's about to get fired. So he goes to continental Africa and finds a mythical tribe. There's this tall gentleman that can do it all, but comes to find out there's a split in the tribe where his older brother has left and went into the mainstream, downtown area, doesn't live in the suburbs, wears Western clothes, doesn't quite support the indigenous culture or habits, and ultimately they all come together to win. So his brother can have the opportunity to go to the United States and succeed in life and play basketball. The reason this mentality is dangerous because if children see this opportunity and they keep seeing this message resonate over and over again, then they'll think that's the only option to leave their home continent and go somewhere else. And then you'll experience brain drain, not only in athletics, but in all other sectors of society, and you won't be able to improve. Um, Also, a lot of these panelists talked about African Americans seeing Africa in a different light. We just discussed how media can portray how one feels about different places, and particularly the place where African Americans are indigenously from. Um, One of the coaches in the panel said, through the lives of these globe-trotting athletes, African Americans may learn about their origins and mentally travel to the Congo, Senegal, or Cameroon. So, as more of these basketball players come into light and people demonstrate the ability to market them, and once these athletes are marketed and then their stories are shown pre-game, post-game, you're seeing where they come from. Maybe a big city, they may didn't have as much money as everyone else had, but their stories parallel African Americans are a good number in the United States. What do I mean by that? That the narrative that's constructed that they may not have a house or a floor or eat dirt or things like that is broken down, and you see individuals from large metropolitan urban cities just in a different country struggling to make it and using basketball as a vehicle, similar to the way people do in the United States.
There. When you said you were doing this topic, I was like, I'm really interested because the NBA really had been talking about NBA Africa for a while. And it was interesting because you listed all those players that you listed, the 13 current players that are in the NBA. We're talking about most of them are playing at a very high level. I mean, outside of maybe Manute Bol, who just was very awkward and just almost too tall, so to speak. I mean, Akeem Olajuwon, with all respect, is a highly respected, NBA player.
I'd
And
say the best of all time at the position.
and think about it. And even though we knew he was African, I would pose this question to you and anybody listening to the show. Remember, if you want to join the conversation, just post something in the comments and we'll put it on the screen and we'll share your comments. For what it's worth, I absolutely knew that Akeem Olajuwon was African, but I really wasn't thinking about him being African when he was playing basketball. If that makes any sense. It just never, I never really connected the dots. And when you just listed all of those people who are playing at such a high level, again, Joel Embiid, Oladipo, I just, for some reason, because it seems like they've been Americanized enough. Does that make sense? That piece of their African culture doesn't even kind of stand out. Manute Bol, I'll be honest, it was right in your face. I don't know why. I have no idea why. But everybody else you just talked about seems very kind of Americanized or Europeanized, if that makes any sense. To me,
it does. Well, to answer that question, a lot of those players, you get that feel because they went through the college and most of the AAU basketball system. Going through these systems, you got to see their names. And then once they got to college, you would see their name. And then in the school's regalia or clothing. And then you start getting familiar with them, seeing a name every day on Sports Center. Then they get drafted. And then the most important thing is the main thing talked about at this conference was the killing of George Floyd. Africans on the continent, there's a big perception that there's a disconnect, that they don't like African Americans. But this conference was how to use sport to challenge this because they were upset at all the killings of their brothers and sisters within the United States and globally. So there was a lot of good things broken down in this conference. And the one main thing that they talk about is that national identity that they don't want to lose, especially when the Basketball African League begins to take place this spring.
One of the things that pops up in my mind in this conversation, so I have a younger cousin, and he grew up out east in the Maryland, D.C. area, played basketball. In fact, he played at Virginia Commonwealth with Shaka Smart when they were making the run like toward the Final Four and stuff. And I remember clearly, I'm trying to remember the name of the Catholic school he went to, but I'm just drawing a blank on it. I remember
St. John's.
It'll come to me at some point. But I remember clearly that they had several African players that played at his school and obviously had host families. So it's interesting that even when you talk about even beyond college, how you have schools that are now, like you said, how Major League Baseball has its Caribbean League and they're kind of starting to develop it. A lot of even at the high school level are seeing there's talent abroad and they're recruiting as young as high school to bring these players over.
Well, definitely. If you look at what the NBA did about 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago with NBA Europe. And when they did that, they infused NBA Europe. And at that time, the and one street ball thing was going on. So now, 15, 20 years later, you see European players playing like, street ball players from America because that's what they were socialized to do. Later on, I'll actually talk about that and ask, why is the NBA going to Africa so late when the majority of his players hail from there?
And it's interesting because I'm not sure if you talk about it later on in the episode. Is there a higher amount of Africans in the Euro League? Because for some reason I feel like there's not. I know a lot of Americans maybe that don't make it to the NBA or don't play in the G League if they're good enough or if they have that pipeline to make it over. Because I know there is a threshold of how many non-national players that you can have on your Euro team. I know that. So you can't have like 3 Americans and, you can't have this team full of Americans like on your Swedish or Greek or Polish team. So do you know in the European League, are there more Africans playing in that league?
Well, in most European leagues, the people you see are of African American descent, former NBA or CBA or college all-stars that go over. You don't see a lot of the African basketball players do it. And soccer, yes, but basketball, no. A lot of the African basketball players, because the NBA is the best league, they try to matriculate to the U.S. through the college system. Most of them don't make it, but being working in athletics, I noticed firsthand that there's so many high schools with immersion programs across the United States with
Mhm.
uh, African basketball players training them to be the so-called next best one, the untapped gem. So this is exploitation throughout high school athletics.
And it's interesting because when I think about, for instance, Serge Ibaka, who grew up in Spain, it would
Mhm.
make sense that he played basketball because there is the Spanish league. There's basketball in Spain.
Mhm.
It would make sense that Giannis would play basketball in Greece because the Greece has a team. There's a team in Greece. There's a team in
Mhm.
Crete. So it actually makes sense to me, the two of them, when I start looking at where people came from and they're playing basketball. Some of that to me seems like it's really tying in, and it
Mhm.
makes sense a lot. Here we go. Ted Washington, thank you for sharing. Slice and dice.
Yeah, that's Coach Ted Washington right there, one of my fellow coaches. He needs to show himself. He's a great chef. Um,
Ah,
15-year D lineman, former New England Patriot and Buffalo Bill. Amazing chef, great guy.
okay. Good stuff. Well, maybe you can call the Bears and give them some pointers because they need some help on all levels.
They
Okay.
need us. They need us.
anyways. All right. Let me go back behind the curtain so you can keep going and make it through your break. All right. Just
Okay.
those thoughts just popped in my head and I
No,
wanted to
no
see what
problem.
you
No
wrote.
problem. So again, as Maya has stated, there is an issue for this, and after break, we're going to talk about that. How the Basketball Africa League is needed. Um, Currently, right now, there's tons and tons of players who are leaving when they get out of middle school, looking for this opportunity. We want to keep these opportunities homegrown, so this league can be domestically grown, similar to that. Associated with Japanese baseball. Um, so we're going to take a quick break and reset. Then when we come back, we'll specifically talk about the Basketball Africa League, its exception, its goals, and its attempt to become the world's #1 basketball league. Stay tuned to Sports 101 with Jamar Harp. We'll be right back.
See me. See me.
See me. See my dark skin and my kinky hair.
See me. Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my tan skin and my curly hair.
See me.
Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my face, wet with tears from years of oppression.
See my hands, weathered and worn from decades of pulling myself up through your society.
See my feet split from centuries of walking your delicate line. See me.
See me.
See me.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
Welcome back. I'm Jamar Harp, and this is Sports101, the sports show that discusses sports beyond the X's and O's. We talk about the game from a people, places, and things perspective through the lens of history in the past, present, and current. Again, make sure you get social with the show and SportsZone Chicago by following us on social media through Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram under the name @SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but most importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app through the iTunes, Google Play, or Amazon stores. Thank you for our ad I just read. Please see me. I just like also to add everyone, not only do we want to be seen, hear us, understand us, and then let's work together to build a better place and where we live at. Getting back to our show, now let's talk about the Basketball Africa League. If you look on the screen right here, you have the logo of the Basketball Africa League. You see there's a gentleman shooting a set jump shot with the traditional colors that you see. There's some red, green. You don't see the black, but they have the blue. I know some people are going to say, well, why is the name Basketball Africa League instead of African Basketball League? I remember in most countries of people of color, the subject-verb agreement is different. So just like in Spanish, where you have Casablanca, which is house white, you have the Basketball Africa League with the subject-verb agreement being switched, not like you do in English. So during this last All-Star weekend, Commissioner Silver, he made an announcement. He described himself as a tireless advocate for Africa. I believe he made this announcement because the NBA has been known as the top league to let their players speak on social issues. On the NBA, they do a lot of things in regards to recently they let them wear slogans in the bubble. However, these things were just show they didn't really affect change. So I guess from doing this, Commissioner Silver is a tireless advocate for Africa because his players are African American. So during this, they had a luncheon, and Commissioner Silver announced a new league. Dikembe Mutombo, who's a strong advocate not only for basketball in Africa but for change. He's built a few hospitals, developed lights in areas that didn't have electricity or grid. So he's been an advocate just for the increase in infrastructure in many countries. They're asking Commissioner Silver to come to Africa for years and help grow the game on the continent. The reason Mutombo was doing this because, as I stated earlier, about 20 years ago, or 15 to 20 years ago, the NBA came out with NBA Europe. NBA Europe coincided with the street ball era. And if you look at the basketball game in Europe, it grew just off of that. So how do I know that it grew? So we look at the early 90s and the USA Dream Team. They ran through everyone, the European as well as the African countries. I don't know if everyone remembers, but there was a game where they played, the Dream Team played Angola, and colorful Charles Barkley gave compliments or comments stating that he didn't know if he was going to hit with a spear There was incidents in the game where he elbowed a couple of the Angolan players, and at this time they're members of the national team, but the talent level is nowhere near what's in the United States. So with NBA Europe and then the street ball era, um, these European kids started to play the game like people do in the inner cities in America. So in the 2019, 18, 17, 16 NBA draft, you see these European players, especially the point guards, with moves that mimic playground legends. And that's due to the street ball and success of that, as along with NBA Europe. Um, for a while, there was a lot of talking NBA about producing the quote unquote next great white hype or Larry Bird. When Keith Van Horn came out, they tried to portray him in commercials that were very old school. He would have like Converses on, high shorts. His uniform would mimic that of the individuals in the movie Hoosiers, trying to display like an image of traditional James Naismith style of basketball to bring that back. And I think that's why the NBA went to Europe first instead of Africa. Remember that the predominant population of the NBA is African Americans. So if you wanted to grow it and get better as a league, then I would have went to Africa first before Europe. Um, Again, after the Dream Team, the Redeem Team, and other United States men's national teams face stiffer competition due to what the NBA's efforts were in Europe and the street ball tapes that came out so prevalently in the 90s. Now these European teams is tougher. The United States is not getting blowout wins anymore on a global level because basketball has increased, and Dikembe Mutombo and other athletes would like to see the same thing in continental Africa. There was also a lot of notable people at this luncheon. You had the FIBA president, and that's the Federation of International Basketball Association. So the FIBA Africa president was there. His name was Alphonse Bilal. That's a Portuguese name. Angola used to be a Portuguese colony, so you'll see a lot of Portuguese names there. Toronto Raptors president Masai Ujiri was there, again a Nigerian national. The NBA vice president and managing director of NBA Africa, Amadou Fall, was there. Um, the NBA, since NBA Europe, they started to do different things in Africa. You had basketball without borders, you had NBA Africa, and other things that tried to highlight basketball in short snippets, meaning it might be a camp, it might be a clinic, it might be some education in revolves to these exhibition games, but there's nothing long term trying to build infrastructure similar to what Major League Baseball did with facilities in the Dominican Republic. You also had the deputy commissioner of the NBA, Mark Tatum, two-time WNBA All-Star from Nigeria, Chini Ogunike, um, and they all sat there to discuss the formulation of the Basketball African League. So let's talk about the Basketball African League and how it started. Um, so there's over 50 countries in Africa, but all of them weren't FIBA regulated basketball countries. So of the 32 FIBA basketball related countries, they had a large tournament, and these professional clubs or pro teams came from Angola, Egypt, Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, and Tunisia. So, if you know anything about the continent, all these teams are from countries in the Southwest, the Northeast, the West Coast, as well as the East side of Africa. Remember, this is a large continent, and you can fit the continental United States inside of it three times. So these countries, some of these countries aren't even close to each other. There were some other top FIBA teams that qualified from different countries. So from Nigeria, you had a professional team called the River Hoopers that qualified. In Angola, there was a team called Petro de Luanda. Um, they're owned by a gas company, henceforth the name Petro de Luanda. A fun fact about them is This company also sponsors a soccer team. So it'll be similar to how Cruz Azul sponsors a soccer team in Mexico. Cruz Azul is Blue Cross Blue Shield. Bayern Medical Company, they sponsor several teams in Germany, Bayern Munich, Bayern Leverkusen. So this is not new that professional companies are getting in the mix of purchasing professional teams. And then from Senegal, you had AS Douanes. Now, the Senegalese teams obviously have more French names because they were colonized by France. Um, the funny thing about this tournament that in this league, there's African American players on the teams, and there's going to be more that come. So there's a Nigerian team called AS Saleh, and they have African American named Terrell Stoglin. He was a former point guard for the University of Maryland. There's a team in Sudan called Monastir, and they have a shooting guard, Chris Crawford, that formerly played for the University of Memphis. So again, this basketball African league is already trailblazing. On their original rosters, they have African Americans showing a connection, and then like other leagues in Europe, there's no set criteria or how many they can have because they're all African in their eyes. So just like Maya said earlier, where there's a quota in Europe where you can only have so many Americans, there's a quota in Canadian football, you can have so many Americans. In the Basketball African League, if you're of African descent, you're good to go. So there's teams striving to get these players from America. They may get cut from the NBA or get kicked out of college, etc. There's also a large push to get players who may opt out and decide they want to go pro 1 year before going to the NBA. So a lot of these prospects, like LaMelo Ball, for instance, if this league was up and running a few years ago or 2 years ago, then maybe he would have went there instead of Lithuania or the various places that he went. Again, so once this league begins to play, there's going to be more players or African American players that come over and play because again, their goal is to be the best league in the world. Why do they think this? Because if the NBA is the best league in the world and it's filled with individuals of African descent, having a professional league in Africa that spans the entire continent with teams 12 hours away from each other. After a while, they want to infuse the style of play that's used in America there, along with their individual techniques to make the game compatible with the NBA. Now let's talk about the host cities and arena size for this inaugural season. Again, it's going to be played in many countries that are not close to each other. And so in Senegal, we're going to start off in Dakar Arena, which hosts 15,000. In Cairo, Egypt, they're going to play in the Indoor Halls complex. It hosts basketball. It can host futsal or indoor soccer events. And it seats 16,000. In Morocco, they're going to this is a Muslim name because Morocco is northwest Africa or above the Sahara. It's Saleh El Bouzawi, and that's a smaller stadium. It's 2,000. Remember, basketball is relatively new on the continent. So after this year of inception, I'm confident that larger facilities will be built to mimic these vast soccer stadiums that all these countries have, as soccer is their national sport. In Angola, you have the Kimbale Arena, which holds 12,000 people. In Rwanda, there's a 10,000 seat arena. That's where the Final Four is going to be at this year. If you know anything about Rwanda, it's one of the fastest growing economies in the world and predicted to be one of the world's top economies in the next 10 years. And then obviously you can't forget about the African giant, Nigeria. They will be hosting games as well and have a few teams within this league. During the All-Star weekend, Commissioner Silver again talked about this, and he had several goals. And one of his goals was to support this league. However, I would like to kind of question that sport. I also forgot about Mohammed Mazzali Sports Hall in Tunisia, which is again above the Sahara. When we talk about above and below the Sahara, that's usually an indication of Arab countries, meaning that those are countries that have been colonized, and a lot of the citizens don't look like quote unquote traditional Africans because they're descendants of colonizers. So you get the very light people that are Arab countries like Morocco, Tunisia, um, even northern Egypt. So teams will travel to one site at a time to compete like in a set amount of games. So they're going to have basic tournaments. And during the season, it's going to be, because it's COVID this year, so they're just testing it out. It's going to be 45 total games beginning in January and with a championship game in March. Now, they broke up after the tournament. There's only 12 teams that made it. So the 32, you had 6 champions that were automatically invited, and then there were 6 more that came through the tournament. And through these 12 teams, the Basketball Africa League has developed 2 conferences. The first conference is the Nile Conference, and the Nile Conference consists of teams from Tunisia, Cameroon, Nigeria, Mozambique, Egypt, and Rwanda. The other conference, so this is the AFC and NFC of African basketball, is a Sahara Conference. The Sahara Conference consists of teams from Algeria, Madagascar, Senegal, Morocco, Mali, and Angola. Now, if you look at both conferences, you can see the vast difference in these teams. So there's going to be a lot of flights. That's where they're going to have different sites where it's like think of it like a volleyball or softball roundup for those who are familiar with college athletics, or teams that go to one site that are from long distances apart to get 3 or 4 games in a weekend. So that's pretty much what's going to happen. In the past, again, the NBA has done things in Africa. They've had over 20 Basketball Without Borders events. And Basketball Without Borders was a program that the NBA implemented to showcase their brand and hopefully gain awareness from individuals in places that they didn't really have basketball or the NBA. They also have programs that the children associate with and they can matriculate through. So, for example, Oladipo and some of the other African players in the NBA, they are graduates of these Basketball Without Borders programs. And what Basketball Without Borders does is, besides doing drills and clinics, they set up exhibition games. There was recently an exhibition game in Johannesburg. The past 3 off seasons of the NBA were local South African basketball players played against international players, and then obviously were some NBA players. Again, the goal of the Basketball Africa League is to promote nationalism in African countries and the continent. How is this possible? Through play and getting sponsorship, their goal is to promote a better view of their countries. These individuals are cognizant of Western media and what's portrayed, in particular, of children that are leaving. It's always a war-torn, famished situation. They're escaping a warlord. They didn't have food. They didn't have different things to eat. So the narrative of them coming to the United States to better their lives, they want to break this down and really highlight what's going on in their countries. Again, if you look at economics, in particular the world's growing economies, a lot of the world's largest economies that are growing now and expected to boom in the next 5 to 10 years are located within continental Africa. Um, they also had a goal to make this league better than the NBA by playing games against the NBA and implementing strategies similar to what Japanese baseball does. If you look at Japanese baseball, the reason they've been sustainable is they didn't follow the rules of in regards to Negro League baseball. When Jackie Robinson left, then there was a a migration of players, and ultimately the league shut down. In Japanese baseball, they have it set up to promote their internal league and to promote nationalism. So before you can think about going anywhere, and most people go to the United States because that's one of the rival professional leagues, you have to play in Japan for, I believe, 7 years, maybe longer, depending on your contract. But you do have to play in Japan. Why do they do this? So they can keep their best Japanese talent in Japan. They can grow their league and be sustainable. And then when events happen, such as the World Baseball Classic, they can be competitive against baseball powerhouses such as the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, etc. Um, there was a question asked and said, why start the Basketball Africa League now with the NBA knowing the athletic prowess of Africans? So we go back to what the Magi, Maya Kai, said earlier. Um, this is where that falls into place. We talk about these growing economies, and we talk about the money that's involved now, and the overall sentiment of bringing someone over. So a lot of people want to take advantage of this. There's an NBA agent named Bill Duffy. He told the Undefeated periodical last year that Africa will be the next frontier as far as top international basketball talent. So basically, what he's saying is that there's going to be tons and tons of talent scouts that flock to the continent due to the success of all the players that we mentioned earlier. And this success is monumental because a lot of these players didn't start playing basketball until ninth or 10th grade. And the acceleration of learning the game to get where they are now is unparalleled throughout sport. I've already stated that some of the world's fast and growing economies are happening in Africa. So the question is, what can these investors and managers in this league do to keep it nationalized so it doesn't end up like Negro League Baseball falling when the top talent, after one good season, is wished to the NBA?
One of the things when I read this stat, and I said, there is so much truth in this stat about Africa. Africa is damn near the largest continent on Earth. I mean, it's massive. If you go, and actually, what's interesting is always been a large misrepresentation of it, even like in maps and globes. Like you said, you can put 3 United States into Africa. That's how large that it is. What's always been interesting about Africa, unfortunately, it's been a continent, because Africa is not a country; it's a continent. Like it's got 50 countries in it, but it's the one place we tend to say Africa. We really look at it very homogeneously. By the way, something we tend to do with Black people. Everyone's homogenous. Where there's 50 countries, it means there's 50 cultures with 50 languages, but yet people tend to group them all together. But what's interesting about this stat and about the economy in Africa is I just had this conversation, not necessarily sports related, but this is something that I think is interesting because I was saying one of the largest colonizers in the modern day world are the Chinese. And the Chinese, little by little, are infiltrating through Africa. If you spend any time in the West Indies, you will say, Chinese people in the Bahamas? Not to be funny, but it kind of seems like misplaced in a way. I'm not talking about 1 or 2. I'm talking about what would be a community. When the U.S. government, the military left out of Panama, the Chinese moved in to take over. The Chinese are known for bringing in resources, which is money, and building infrastructure. So when I was in the Cayman Islands like 2 years ago, I was like, what a beautiful island. And the person who kind of turned into our tour guide said, well, pretty much the Chinese came in and they own the island because they built all the infrastructure. And the only other investor was, I can't remember the name of the family, but they own Solo Cup, the red cups that people buy. They were the other big investment in the Cayman Islands. So why I think this point about you talking about putting stake into it for Africans is because we so often see how other people will come in because they have the dollars and will take over the opportunities. And I think it's incumbent upon the NBA to, if this is going to be homegrown, then make that opportunity be there for Africans.
I definitely agree. And just for our listening audience, to piggyback off what Maya said, the quote she's talking about We talked about the world's fastest growing economy. So in year 2034, Africa is expected to have the world's largest working age population of 1.1 billion and projected to have uh, that working class population who all be consumers spend $2 trillion. So now when we look at Africa currently and the Chinese investment, is that working class money, is it going to go back to the Chinese corporations that are being built, or is it going to be some indigenous African corporations and teams that it can all flow through, as Maya obviously said? So that's a big issue that people are talking about currently.
And that's the part that I think really has to be looked at really closely, is that they don't lose that certain amount of autonomy and control over this opportunity for themselves. And what also this does, and I'm gonna go off because you're almost done with your show, this is putting Africa in a different light. Remember, National Geographic had to really apologize for saying every time they put Africa on a cover or talked about it, you always thought it was back in the desert, like they were like rural and like they had no type of real culture or modernization. This right there with the NBA tells you how misleading National Geographic and so much of the rest of the world was about Africa.
Definitely, definitely. So again, as Maya eloquently stated, the media, a lot of the images they show are false. A lot of people in these big cities is just like anywhere else. You have modern cities and you have the rural country, but in these large urban cities, I went to school with a few people from Nigeria at North Carolina Central in my undergraduate degree, and they told me that their great grandfathers were lawyers, um, and just talked about the technology that they have, and it's not like at all what they see on TV. People ask them, do they see wild animals? They say yes when we go to a zoo, but they don't really have that. So again, Masai Ujiri and other people, that is their main concern. How are we going to create jobs with this African basketball league, and it's not run by Africans? You see all the team owners, Chinese or American investors. This is a good opportunity for American basketball players to tie in, and that leads me to our final thought. Um, as we've talked about this episode, the importance of establishing the African Basketball League, as well as establishing the ownership of continental and Africans throughout the diaspora to help this league grow. In doing so, something will be established that hasn't been done yet in the future in the history of sports, having a league outside the United States with its constituency filled predominantly individuals of African descent compete with the United States for the quote unquote best league or best basketball in the globe. If this is done right, this can be monumental and can send shockwaves throughout. Just think of this. What if NFL, NBA, MLB baseball players start to buy ownership in this league? You can create so many opportunities for investment and future growth outside of basketball. The potential opportunities for NBA players who want to be head coaches, GMs, and managers is now affordable with the Basketball African League. Um, Please support this league and all it does, and hopefully that individuals through the diaspora can take it and build it up so it can rival the NBA. Thank you for tuning in to Sports 101 with me, Jamar Harp, and the Magi Maya Kai. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Coach_Harp412. And please make sure to get social with our show and the litany of other shows sponsored by SportsZone Chicago on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search SportsZone Chicago, but most importantly, download the app, people. Download the app. The app can be found on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon. Again, thank you for this week's episode of Sports 101. I will see you next week with another piece on sports, culture, and history within sport. I am Jamar Hart. Thank you for your time. And I'm gone. All right.